I couldn't do this alone. I had to bring two fantastic folks with me. I got Dre and Papa Herbie. We're going to be talking about these horror stories, the things that they've seen. They do security operations for Huntress. We're going to talk a little bit about what Huntress is, but just want to say welcome to the stream, Dre and Herbie.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
very
having us.
much.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Van freaking tastic. I just want to ask you both because security operations is one of my favorite things in all of security, right? I love the operation side. Maybe it's because of my Marine Corps background, but I would say the security operations is the thing that gets me the most excited, whether you're talking about threat hunting, you're talking about threat intelligence, incident response, all of those things, they just fascinate me and have gotten me out of bed for the last 20 years. What is it about security operations that you two find so endearing?
I'm gonna let Herbie go first.
Oh, thanks, man. I was about to say you go first. Um, I don't know. It's one of those things that I guess in the grand scheme of cyber, it is kind of the underdog because of course everyone takes pen testing, red teaming as the sexy side, and
Mm-hmm.
then being the defender tends to be the boring side. Um, quote unquote. So I don't know. I've always enjoyed the fact of helping customers, whether it's internally, um, at the SOCs that I've worked with, or here at Huntress, um, to get a leg up, I guess you could say, against the attackers and better defend themselves and try to share knowledge with the teams as I can. Um, that's why I'm still in the SOC world after I don't know 15 years, I guess, give or take.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a long time to be in the trenches, but I mean, every day is different. It keeps refreshing itself. There's new technologies, there's new ways of doing things. So it's never stale. What about you, Dre?
Well, man, you just said it. You're in the trenches. I think you can pivot from SOC to so many other different security departments, but the thing that you miss every time you pivot is you're not seeing that day-to-day tradecraft. And that's what I'm here for. I love it. I love that every day I'm going to turn up and I know I'm going to see something interesting. Huge differentiator to detection engineering, even to incident response. Incident response,
Mm-hmm.
you're there, but you're there for sort of longer cases, bigger cases, juicier cases, but you don't have that day-to-day rhythm that being in a SOC has.
Fantastic. That's exactly the way I think of it. So, what are we going to do today? We did a little bit of team introductions. Going to tell you a little about who Huntress is, what we're all about, who we protect, and we're going to get to scary story time. These two have pulled together some really, really great stories, and we're going to pick them apart and maybe empathize a little bit with some of you out there who have dealt with some of this stuff. Be sure to drop anything that resonates with you into the chat. We want to hear what you've dealt with, or maybe it's something you've never seen before. We want to hear it all. We're going to get to some Q&A and talk about where you can go next with Huntress. So just to tell you a little bit about Huntress and what we focus on, honestly, one of the big reasons I came to Huntress is because I found this need to help protect the 99%. And I knew that there was a company out there that was focused on small and medium-sized businesses. And I've been a friend of Kyle Hanselevin. He's our CEO for a long time. And Huntress is really that company that was tailor built for the SMB market. A lot of other solutions, they're really built for that the upper 1%. Those are the enterprise level clients. And of course, I mean, that makes sense from a business perspective because it's also hard to scale. But as you can see, we are protecting 2.3 million endpoints across the world. That's something that we've been able to figure out. We've been able to figure out how do you scale operations for the smaller organizations out there because they need just as much protect as the big companies out there. We have 4,000 partners. We partner a lot with service providers, MSPs, MSSPs around the world to help enable them to serve their clients. And the best thing about us is that we have the folks that work with Dre and work with Herbie. We have the threat ops team. They are actual hunters. They are actual security analysts. They're 24/7. They're following everything that's going on in your environment. It's not just a piece of technology that's throwing out false positives. You have a solid technology that's backed by human eyes, that's backed by human ingenuity and innovation. And that's how we're enabling ourselves to do the best that we can for our customers. And one of the best things that we have is we are able to do that 24/7 monitoring, right? As a former leader in cybersecurity, that was one of the most important things to me, is to ensure that even while my team didn't have eyes on glass, that there was someone watching my back throughout the night, throughout the weekend, during the holidays. We need those folks to back us up. And because I've seen alert fatigue happen across teams, right? I've been in SOCs where you just have analysts that are going from false positive to false positive, and they're just clearing those things out, and they never get to the work that they were actually paid to do. But not just the alert fatigue of things that are benign or just annoying. We even cover stuff, sophisticated targeted attacks. Right. Our founders, they came from the NSA. I came from the National Security Agency. So their job was to really understand what nation state cyber operations is all about. And that's the type of knowledge that we have inside of Huntress. One of the things we had to talk about was BEC. BEC is one of those things that we don't talk about as much anymore, because things like ransomware, things like third-party attacks have really overtaken the media. But when you look at things like BEC, business email compromise, that is the $50 billion scam, as they call it. But it is something that I've dealt with in my career. It's constantly happening, and it can have real impacts, especially to small and medium-sized businesses, because I've been able to see that firsthand. And so that's why we have things that will enable us to support you all with that type of stuff. So we have the MDR for Office or Microsoft 365. Like I said, it's human-led, technology-driven, super easy to use, fully managed. That managed word is what's the most important to me as a business or as a cybersecurity leader. And it's purpose-built for SMBs using Microsoft 365. This wasn't an afterthought. This wasn't, oh, we'll tack it on after. It was purpose-built just for this purpose, just for you all out there that are in the small to medium-sized business arena, and you leverage Microsoft 365. So with that, we are going to get to story time. I'm going to pass it over to you, Dre. Let's talk a little bit about your scary stories.
Yeah, man, let's go. So Chris, if you bump us to the next slide, we'll get straight in. So Papa Herbie, Chris, and I have put together some real terrifying stories. And the reason we put these stories together is we're not trying to sell you on FUD. We're not trying to make anybody terrified. What we want to do is just communicate the kind of intrusions that we're seeing with our MDR for Microsoft 365, how we dealt with it, and we'll give you some tips along the way. So Chris, I think it skipped a slide. If you don't mind going back, just the one, man. Yeah, just there we go. Cool. So we'll start with this one. So what you're looking at here is a detection that shows a user that usually comes in from a Windows 10 device, suddenly come in from an anomalous Ukrainian IP on iOS. Now, we don't need to get caught in the detail and the weeds, because what you can see in that middle screenshot is really interesting. You can see a bar chart. Pretty simple, I know, but as Papa Herbie is going to tell us, adding a visual analysis for anomalies is huge, because it's sometimes hard that if you're looking at a whole list of stuff to spot the anomaly, to spot something that doesn't fit, super difficult. But if you create a visual, suddenly it sticks out to everybody. Now, Herbie, you've been quite important in creating some of the dashboards and some of the stuff we've used for M365. Would you tell us a little bit about, like, when you're trying to visualize inbox and Microsoft 365 intrusions, how important is it to have good visuals that help with anomaly analysis?
Well, you know, I'm not gonna lie here. I'm a former Windows sysadmin, right? One of the reasons why I didn't do Linux is like the wall of text and things like that, because my brain just kind of overloads when I'm faced with a wall of text. So looking at, especially Azure and M365 logs, it's a lot easier for people like myself to pick out those patterns when doing some kind of visualization, whether it's a simple line chart or a heat graph, whatever. In specifically for user locations and where people are authing or what IP that they've been seen coming from and stuff like that, it's really easy to discern where in a bar graph you see, like here, you've got 100 and something hits, and then all of a sudden you've got 52, 53. That's easier seen versus just looking at a wall of text. So I always try to keep that in mind, because as an analyst, as a former analyst even, to get to the data faster, to resolve that case, and to stop the attack, you need to kind of get in front of the data as fast as possible. And sometimes that's through a visualization.
Yep. And so what Herbie's talking about here, like the nightmares aren't just for the end user, right? The end customer. The nightmare can also be for security personnel. It is a nightmare trying to spot anomalies. It is a nightmare if you try and do this through human-led sort of intervention. You have to have a good level of automation with detections, threat hunting with manual stuff, and then just good analysis. And that's what Herbie's trying to talk about. Like the visual is how you combine all of that. And Chris, if you don't mind bumping us to the next slide. How we communicate this to a partner, how we communicate this to the end user, is not by telling them about all the graphs and all of that. And one of the things that I think that we do at Huntress quite well anyway, is we condense these nightmares and we just put it into a nice report, and it's still a nightmare. And chances are when people get a Huntress report, it does ruin your day because we tend to be pretty accurate. 0.7 false positive rate in 2022, I'll have you know. But what you're looking at this report is us just really spoon feeding the user, the partner. And what we're saying is, hey, we know this isn't accurate. We know that this user is always coming in from Canada, and we know that they shouldn't be coming in from this Ukrainian IP. And we gift them really step-by-step guidance on, hey, kill the session, rotate the credentials, enforce MFA. Chris, like you see a lot of stuff, and you're quite, I think, good at being vendor agnostic. How does this kind of stuff compare when folks are getting other kind of sort of cloud and Microsoft 365 security notifications?
I mean, honestly, it's night and day different. You know, everything that you're talking about from that visual instance, where you're able to see what the anomaly is, everything from that to this report, you really want the context. What is the story? Because a lot of times what we do is we get half-baked stories, we get pieces of information without the general context. But this is relatively complete to me. If this is something that my team produced themselves, I mean, this would be a fantastic launch into an incident response. But I mean, you rarely get this type of context when you're going into a potential incident.
Yeah, man. And I mean, Ali Khan has asked a fantastic question. Will Huntress MDR automatically disable the account if it detects a threat? So Ali, we will, and I'll tell you a horror story in a bit that sort of illustrates that. But I just want to sort of tie up what Chris and Herbie have told us here, that the real horror story isn't necessarily the intrusion. Because this was an obvious one, right? A user consistently coming in from one place, Canada, and then anomalously signing in once from Ukrainian IP. Nah, dude, bad. The real horror story is, how do you detect that? How do you combine that in a report? How do you make it action? Terrifying. And Chris, if you bump us to the next slide, what I want to do is tell a quick story about, hey, here's how difficult it can be to get this right. So Chris, if you bump us one more on that, so the animation comes out, man. What you're looking at here is one of our stories where we have a user agent. That's pretty weird. Now, if you're not sure what a user agent is, all it is when you use a device to access an internet resource. The user agent is what the device or the tool will say, hey, here's how I'd like you to show me that web page. So for example, this is how your phone is able to get certain web pages in web format, because it will send a user agent saying, hey, I'm a phone. Well, what you're looking at here is a user agent that, if you're familiar with user agents, it's pretty weird. We've got an Azure one and we've got a Python one. So what we've done here is we've shown you the screenshots on the right, but don't worry about those. All that really matters here is that these are weird. You aren't going to see these all the time. But hey, folks that know, it's really hard to detect on anomalous user agents. It's actually really difficult to do user agent anomaly detection. Here's why. I can sign in from my phone with about 4 different browsers in about 5 minutes. They're all going to have slightly different user agents. So you can't do pattern recognition for one particular user. It's just not going to work with a high fidelity detection. And Herbie, you'll be able to tell us a little bit, man. Like, how important is it for analysts when we get a detection for it to be like, hey, this is right? Like, this needs to be the best of the best detection, essentially telling the analyst something bad is happening here.
Well, it goes back to the context and the story, right? So, and even then there's two sides to the coin, right? So if an analyst goes down a rabbit hole that is incorrect or doesn't tell the complete story and issues that report, well, that report has an impact on our partners and customers. And if we don't, from an analyst perspective, educate and notify our customers and partners as to exactly what's going on, then that leads them potentially down rabbit holes that they don't need to go down to, and stuff like that. So it really boils down from thinking through, the context, like Chris Sanders talks about the investigative theory and the mindset of an analyst and stuff like that. It's really asking about the critical questions and then using the data that you have at your fingertips, whether it's logs, visualizations, even previous reports that have happened over the last 24, 48, 7 days kind of thing, to weave that story to make sure that that report and that analysis is spot on. So when it is issued, our partners and our customers know exactly what their marching orders are. And if they need to go spin up IR, they know exactly kind of where that starting point is and stuff like that. So it's all about being very concise in a or being concise in a very quick format while being technically accurate, if that makes sense.
No, 100. I mean, that's that idea of being concise but being accurate. That's everything we're trying to do here. And so what folks will be pleased to know is this was a horror story because, hey, this actually went undetected for a while. Here's how it went undetected. We don't have detections for this kind of thing without threat hunting. For folks that are like, what is threat hunting? Threat hunting is the act of looking for novel tradecraft that you do not yet have detections for. What you're supposed to do with a threat hunting cycle is you're supposed to do that manual bit, put a lot of effort in, and then create automations afterwards. And that's exactly what we did here. So Chris, if you wouldn't mind bumping us to the next slide. We took that very manual approach of looking for weird stuff, right? And we found weird stuff and we reported it. Here's what the partner got back to us with. The partner came back to us and said, hey, listen, there was no way that we were going to find this ourselves because they have people all over the world. They have people across the whole world. And the downside of that means impossible travel, anomalous geolocation, that isn't going to work. And so you need to come up with better detections when you're trying to do Microsoft 365 compromise. And so what we did there is we did a manual threat hunt. We looked for those anomalous user agents and we sent those out, and those partners came back to us and said, that's absolutely not right. Brilliant. So not a horror story for the partner, but it's a horror story for us because we come back to how do we manage that as security professionals? How can we make this scalable? So Chris, if you bump us to the next slide, something that we pride ourselves on is taking exactly what I've just described, that manual threat hunt, turning it into an automation and detection. That automation doesn't mean a human person doesn't look at it. What that means, and Herbie just described this, is that this is a flare that goes up to the analyst that says, hey, look over here, pay attention, something's going down. So what you can see in these screenshots is that we've turned those anomalous user agents into detections. So we've got the Azure Python agent, and then we've got the Python HTTP. If you're interested in the technical details, there is a blog that goes into more detail on the Azure one, and I've got a tweet somewhere on the Python one. But what we really want to tie up with this is that dealing with this stuff is hard if you're trying to just do it yourself. You can just look at Microsoft telemetry, but you're going to be scrolling. What we just previously described was the visual. What we're describing here is marrying threat hunting, expertise, and then detections, automations. And Chris, like you're an industry man, you know this, like the whole industry is moving to AI automation, and they're half getting it right. We do need automation. But what do you think about adding in the human context and making sure there's a human qualifying what's up?
You have to. So I have Hacker Valley Studio, which is a podcast I've ran for the last 5 years. And my co-host and I, we usually agree on most things. And the thing that we do not agree on is he feels like that there is a world in which you can completely automate the human out of security operations. And I'm just going to say that will never, ever happen. You can get close. You can build a lot of context. You can enrich a lot of data. But at the end of the day, you need human eyes on the glass in order to make those final decisions, to take, accept, or mitigate the final risk that you're dealing with at the end of the day. So I'm going to always say that humans have to be in that pipeline.
And I mean, so Herbie and I spend a lot of time trying to work out that sweet balance, Chris, between like, how can we do semi-automation and come up with tools and shortcuts for analysts to scale and for Huntress to be able to, protect our 99% be everywhere? But we also, we can't, I would love to have a SOC team of 100 people, but
Mhm.
we're just never going to have it. I mean, maybe after IPO we can get it, but we're not going to have it anytime soon. And so we spend a lot of time at Huntress trying to balance that. The way that we do detections, I think, marries that up, right? And we've got different severities. What you're looking at here is critical and high. Critical is, we're pretty sure that this is a bang to rights compromise of a user identity. High is, hey, this is probably not, good, but we need far more human qualifying. And somebody asked earlier, hey, what's your SLAs, right? So we don't have the SLAs. What we do have instead are internal requirements of how quick you've got to get your butt to that alert. When there's a critical alert, you've got to get your butt to it and have solved that problem in 30 minutes as an analyst. That's how sure we are about our critical detections. I've worked for security companies that assign everything as a P1 and a critical. If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So we try real hard here to make sure that when we're telling somebody something's up, it really is up. Now, the nightmare behind this, because we're keeping in track with the nightmare, is you have to spoon feed a detection to somebody, right? For something that they may not be too hot on themselves. So user agents, they may not know what tooling is behind this. So what we do, and Herbie's really good at this, is documentation. We document the heck out of stuff so that when an analyst gets a detection, when an Australian analyst who wasn't part of observing any of this gets this detection, we've got documentation, we've got an investigation guide that can help them get it. Herbie, when you're trying to write investigation guides, what kind of stuff are you thinking for sort of, think of a junior analyst, think of people on this call who want to step into security, they know IT stuff. When you're writing docs, how are you bridging that IT knowledge and the security knowledge that somebody may not yet have?
It's a great question, and it's something that when I used to do my vlogs, for example, which I need to start up again. Don't get me wrong, but even from the blog perspective, or writing wikis and SOPs at Rackspace and Visa, and now here at Huntress, the baseline for me was, if a junior analyst got the alert and it was their first day and everyone took off for lunch, could the documentation get the junior analyst to a reasonable conclusion? It is not the best situation. It is most hypothetical, but it is really thinking through the documentation in that kind of light, because your juniors will literally follow it word by word, bullet point by bullet point. Your seniors will have it memorized. And if anything, they're probably not doing it, because let's be honest here. All of us have been in companies where we have our formal SOPs, we have our formal documentation to satisfy the auditors and things like that. And then there's really the way that the team and the SOC members are doing it, the undocumented shortcuts and things like that. So when writing that documentation, I always try to find that balance, but really lean more on, will the junior analyst be able to walk through this doc, walk through this SOP in the tooling, and be able to resolve that question, that alert, with high confidence. And it very well may be, writing that documentation, including other pieces from other, departments, other tooling and stuff like that. Because it may leverage, like in this case, we can have the visualizations in the portal, but we may also have to jump over into Elastic and deep dive into the raw logs. And for that junior analyst, that may be the first time they ever seen Elastic, and they don't know what to necessarily look for, the pitfalls of Elastic and stuff like that. So it's even then making sure that the documentation at a high level can address some of those concerns as well. So I always try to write in that light.
Yep. No, I'm down for this, Abby. I mean, one of the problems that we'll have is everyone has this insecurity. Things change so fast. You need good documentation, but you can't over-prescribe documentation because you need folks to be flexible. And I think Microsoft are wise in so many ways, and in other ways they're not. And so, as people who ingest Microsoft telemetry, we have to find the right people. We have to find the right people, equip them with the right tools and the right docs. but we also need the right detection. So, Chris, if you bump us to the next slide, what I think is quite cool about this story is it really speaks to the subtleties required to do Microsoft 365 detection. So what you're looking at here on the left of the screen is a detection that says, hey, an inbox rule has been created. And what you see is the inbox rule is called ellipsis, so ... and it's moving emails to the folder RSS feeds. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, I don't get why this is malicious. So what adversaries like to do is they like to gain access to a user identity, and then they'll start to move different emails around. They'll start to filter out particular keywords. So let's say invoice or security or phishing. And then what they like to do, once they've tucked those legitimate emails away in a corner, is they then like to make sure that they can send their own malicious ones that will be accepted and won't go to the RSS feeds folder. Why are they trying to do that? Well, because they want to get paid. Business email compromise is really profitable. It earns billions. Ransomware only earns millions. So inbox rules are a big sign to us that something's amiss. But here's the problem. Users create crazy inbox rules, okay? They create real weird stuff. There are inbox rules that will look totally like malicious. It will, be filtering out security, or be filtering out invoice, sending it to RSS feeds. And it was just a user that was just trying to not see any more security notifications.
Mm-hmm.
They were doing it legitimately. So when we're detecting on this, we don't want to issue you a false positive, because then you're going to write back to us and say, Huntress sucks. I don't want, that's embarrassing for me. So let's have a look at what we did here. So you can see that in the top screenshot, you've got the user sort of signing in from New York and Michigan, which was actually pretty common for this user. Like, again, the way geolocation works for IPs and stuff like that, it do be jank. So this user was signing in from places historically with a pattern. But there was something different about their New York authentication and the user agent. We're coming back to user agents again. And what you see in the bottom screenshot is I use Cyberchef, right? And we use Cyberchef and we use the diff. That's literally just a comparison. So we took the one user agent the user always had, and we took this weird one that was associated with the inbox rule. And what you're seeing in the Cyberchef output at the bottom is the difference. And that was how we figured out that that wasn't accurate. And so someone earlier in chat said, hey, how do you deal with they said, well, with mobiles, they'll have a different IP space. Well, this is one of the ways that we're doing that. Let me find the person it was. It was Chris Hickey. This is one of the ways we're doing it, Chris. We're not just looking for one tell. We're almost looking for multiple tells that something isn't adding up here. That's really important so that we don't send false positives. And that false positives, again, they're going to happen. But one of the things that we pride ourselves on is not issuing noise. Like, Chris, you speak to a lot of people. When people get Huntress reports, they tend to sit up and go, oh, shoot, because we're not telling them something's up. Would you mind sharing a little bit? Like, you speak to a lot of people about that. What do they say about Huntress reports and the severity of them?
I mean, all I always hear from anybody that gets a Huntress report is that you guys saved our butts. Because number one, we're getting them the information very quickly, but it's also very complete. And there's a lot of context that they're going to be able to go into an IR situation with confidence. Because a lot of times, whenever you find out about an incident, it's usually one alert, and you're like, okay, now I got to do the entire triage myself, figure out what the context is. I don't know if this is a SEV1 incident. I don't know if this is a SEV4. We have to figure out all this stuff ourselves. And a lot of times when you're in that incident commander seat, it's like getting punched in the side of the head without knowing that it's coming, right? You have to orient yourself. You're like, whoa, what just hit me? But being able to get a report like this from Huntress means like, okay, someone's already looked at it, which is already a big, huge burden off of my shoulder as a cybersecurity leader. But then also to have the context to be able to take that to the rest of the team and say, all right, everybody, this is what we're dealing with, so let's go to work.
Yeah, that's something that, I mean, so I like to tell this story. So I used to write 30-page reports at a particular security company, and I was really proud of my 30 pages. And I remember once I was speaking to a client, and he was like, man, I love your reports. I was like, oh, thanks. And he was like, yeah, I never get past page 1, but I went, wait. I was like, what? What do you mean? And so that changed my mind, right? I was like, no, we do this different. And so something that we really pride ourselves on here, and Herbie knows, him and I are both sticklers for it. The report that we're going to send you has everything you're going to need about that intrusion. Someone asked, do we do incident response? No, but if we did, we'd do it the best in the world, because we give really prescribed, really clear guidance of what we would recommend you do. Quite a few of us come from the IR space, So we know what it's like to be in those shoes. So we don't offer IR, but our reports, especially for Microsoft 365, try to give really detailed sequential guidance of what you need to go and do next. That's unusual because a lot of security places will either inundate you with information or they just send you a security notification saying, hey, something's up. Good luck. That's not useful. And again, there are competitors who do an amazing job at prescribing steps. I just think we do it that little bit better. And Chris, if you wouldn't mind bumping us to the next slide, man.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to add to this is that this was a long time ago, earlier on in my career. I was working with a client and they just seemed to be dealing with all these BECs. They're like, hey, all of our vendors keep getting popped, right? 25 grand here, 30 grand here, 50 grand, 100 grand. And so they're saying all these folks are dealing with all this stuff. And, it's really annoying. But, being a threat intelligence security operations guy, I had to ask the question, what if the call is coming from inside the house, right? I mean, that's one thing that I think is really important for an organization to be able to answer that question. And back then, there wasn't a capability like this to be able to do that analysis, to have somebody that has eyes on for me, being able to check that out and say, hey, this is anomalous and more than likely suspicious. Let's take a look at it. But I would say that, I wish that most organizations had the capability to be able to do something like this.
Yeah, man. It's hard, like managing the telemetry at scale, making it right, making it not burn anybody out. It is a challenge. And not burning people out is one of the most important things, because that's, again, a real nightmare. Chris, we had a question of someone saying, hey, can you share a redacted sample report? Tell me no if you don't mind, but would you just bump us all the way back to when we had the redacted report? A little bit more. Cool, right there. Cool. So, Cyber Hunter, you kind of requested that. I'll just speak to this for just a minute. So I appreciate that quite a few folks are new to Azure, they're new to sort of cloud managing, and they're trying to work this out as they go. Something that's on the roadmap, and something I'm personally doing, is we want to come up with more visual guides. So we're telling folks, hey, here's exactly where you go in the Azure portal to go and kill a session. Here's the exact PowerShell that you can run to go and do things locally. That's the kind of aim that we want. For folks that know about our EDR side of the house, we offer assisted remediations. So what that means is we kind of do a lot of this for you if it's deleting files and doing things like that. We offer a similar but not as sort of detailed one yet for Microsoft 365. That's just the nature of cloud and Azure. But we're going to come up with much better guides to just help people, because if I say to somebody, hey, remove a malicious application, they might go, great, how do I do that? I want to have a guide that helps people do that. So that's what our reports look like, Cyber Hunter. Cool. So what was quite interesting for this one is you can see that this is our geolocation bar chart. So again, we come back to visualizations. There's common themes running through this of what are some of our most offensive stories, like our most nightmarish stories have been. So you would think that actually this is highly anomalous. You would think that a user coming in from this many geolocations and all of this is something, Huntress never sees this, must be bad. Unfortunately, and someone asked in chat, unfortunately, this can happen and it's quite common because of VPNs. Because of the way that folks will use VPNs and they'll sort of geolocate from all over the world. And there are multiple techniques that you can use, right? So one of them that you can use to work out, is this just the same user, is session IDs. Chances are they're going to be using the same session ID, or they're going to have, the same device name, or they're going to be using the same browser. You can generally work out using certain finer details that actually this is just a user with a VPN. You can also work out via the ISP and that kind of thing. But what was really interesting for this user, and Chris, if you don't mind bumping us to the next one, they actually took the user agent away. And I think the adversary did this to try and throw us off, because I looked and there's no tooling that will sort of by default strip the user agent. And there's no legitimate tooling that kind of did this the way this did it. And I think the adversary thought to themselves, they were going to be quite clever and take away a clue for us. And they also, if you look, the browser type was other. The problem is they're nowhere near as clever as they think they are, because that stands out a lot more. When I saw that geolocation, I was like, all right, cool. Let me look at the user agent. Let me look at the ISPs. And then I was like, wait, why is there no Why is there no user agent? This is really weird. And when we dug in a little bit more, we were like, absolutely not. This is malicious. And Chris, if you bump us one, what we did, and Ali Khan asked this earlier, do we isolate accounts? We absolutely do. So we took action, and what you can see there in the red text is us taking action and isolating that threat actor. So we denied the adversary further ingress. Now, Herbie, you and I, we deal with this in the SOC all the time, a lot on the EDR side of the house, but also on M365. I'm going to ask you two questions. One, why is it that we're isolating user accounts, entities, hosts? I don't mind what you can talk to there. And then secondly, how important is it that we're right when we do that isolation?
Well, the simple answer, of course, is we're stopping the threat actor, the compromised account, compromised system, whichever service you want to talk to here, to prevent any further, collateral damage and limit that blast radius, especially on a host endpoint, prevent any further lateral movement further into the environment. But it's the same here in M365. Like, the faster we can get in front of the threat actor to prevent any further damage, to prevent, in some of the other instances that we've seen where the account is taken over, and emails are being sent out, and then we get notified post incident and stuff like that. So I mean, it's highly important from getting in front to prevent that damage. But what was the second question? Sorry, just had squirrel ADHD moment.
And then how important is it that we get that right?
So yeah, okay, my brain was correct. It's absolutely important. I mean, think of it from a first responder kind of instance, right? Someone dials 911, or I think, what is it over in England, 999, if I remember the TV show correctly. And dispatch then radios in to the EMS folks, hey, person's having a stroke. And they show up and they're ready to go, and they're, fitted and booted, to tackle that stroke when the person's actually had a heart attack. So now you're talking about potential seconds that matter. And it's the same kind of mindset, because let's be honest, as analysts, we're a different kind of first responder. So it's the same stresses, it's the same pressure to get things right in a timely, as fast as possible manner. So if we are wrong in our diagnosis, in our analysis, once again, like I said earlier, it sends our partners and customers down a wrong rabbit hole that they may not need to go down, or it distracts them from what's actually going on. And now we're talking about how minutes mattered, and it allowed an attacker to pivot and go further into an environment.
Yeah, I mean, for folks that aren't too sure where Huntress ends up, so we're not in the FTSE 100. Our security agent doesn't end up there. We're not in the FTSE 500. We're in SMBs. We're in mom and pop stores. We're in hairdressers. We're in mechanics. But we're also in children's hospitals. We're also in 999 emergency call centers. It's really important that when we send an isolation out, when we're sending a threat report out, that we're right. Because that has huge cascading impact, right? There are a lot of folks who ask us, when are you going to do IR? Why don't you do IR? We're going to do IR, and we're going to do IR at a scale that no one will believe, right? Because Huntress, that's just how we roll. But one of the downsides is a lot of these places, you send them a report and they're like, hey, we don't know how to do this, this, and this. And that's often why they're coming to us, because we're trying to manage a lot of this. But it is hard. I appreciate that. Sometimes we're ruining people's days, but we've got to do it right. And that's what you're seeing here. You saw us neutralize that threat actor. We isolated the account because we knew we were right. What was really fortunate is pretty quickly the partner came back and said, yeah, man, that was a compromise. And they kept that account isolated. They dug in, and then they cleaned up, and they were able to re-enable the account super easily. And like, Chris, I don't know about you, but I don't want a SOC that isn't right taking action in my environment. Right? I need them to be right. But also, I don't want them to take no action, because they're saying, well, actually, we don't want any responsibility in your environment if we isolate something. So we don't isolate. What do you think of that, man? Do you want a security notification that says, hey, you isolate, you take the steps? Or do you want a security partner that says, hey, we've done this for you, here's what to do next?
for me, it's always been a mix, right? If it's something like a ransomware infection, I'm like, hey, do as much as you possibly can right now. But if it's something like maybe we have a critical asset that you might want to quarantine, but if you quarantine that particular production box, then things might go down, capabilities might go down for the business. So I would say it's a sliding scale. And I think that having that conversation with whoever your support is, your MSP, MSSP, Huntress, saying like, hey, we want you all to take as much action for these particular types of attacks, these particular types of alerts, but give us just the context in these particular cases so we can help make that decision. I'd say that there's a blend of both there.
Yeah, man. And we're going to try and get that right as we scale, because I want to do more stuff for folks. Like I want to just do everything for people. So I could say, hey, you had a thing, we fixed it, don't worry about it.
Yeah, right.
There are things that we won't be able to do just yet, but we want to. And so, Chris, if you don't mind bumping us to the next slide.
Actually, hang on, Dre, because there's an anonymous post, and I think it's a really good question that kind of ties into the nightmare scenarios that we've talked about so far. And somebody asked, any suggestions for handling, detecting session cookie theft and or MFAs being bypassed? From my perspective, and correct me, gents, and by all means, talk about your experiences here, Dre and Chris. But really, this is where, as cliched as it is, defense in depth comes in real handy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you can limit the attack surface as much as possible, great. You know, you've done everything that you could. You can't prevent users from sometimes clicking that link, because we've all seen those phishes that look incredibly real. So potentially, you know, that session cookie gets stolen. So at that point, it then becomes a matter of, what does your conditional access policies look like? What does your, you know, defense in depth policies look like behind that technology, whatever technology we're talking about? In this case, M365 and Azure. Dre, Chris, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, defense in depth. You know, I always talk about cybersecurity when I'm explaining cybersecurity to someone that might not be in technology at all. I explain, hey, have you ever played those tower defense games where you're putting as many solutions around the thing you're trying to protect? That's what cybersecurity is, right? Because there might be a mitigation for one attack, but that might not even help you a little bit with another attack vector. So really trying to figure out, hey, all right, if this happens, if this fails, then boom, we have this to back us up. And that's what defense in depth is creating that cocoon of security around our most critical assets.
And so someone in chat actually said, hey, if I have Huntress, do I still need a conditional access policy sort of architecture? And it's funny, Herbie and I were talking about conditional access policies literally the other day. Conditional access policies are probably the best thing Microsoft has ever invented. They are amazing. Most people aren't using them right. Most admins are using them because they have to use them a certain way. And the example I gave to Herbie is a lot of conditional access policies will be based around geolocation, and they'll be based around device type. Mm-hmm. One of the problems with that is, I said policy. Conditional access what? Policies. I've said, yeah, did I say conditional access policy? Victoria, you're throwing me off, man. What's going on? No, don't apologize, Victoria. We don't need to say sorry here. Never admit weakness. No, so one of the cool things about them is if you set them for device, so you say, right, Windows machines only, and then you get contractors that use Chromebooks. Well, what are you going to do then? So Herbie was like, hey, man, some companies will just send you the device you need. Like, I'm just being facetious. It's the example of, we can build conditional access policies to be much stronger, more resilient, and to be less overhead. There is a blog soon to come about conditional access policies and what Huntress is not necessarily saying you should do, but what you can do. I'm authoring that, so you know, expect that in 2026, but it'll be good when it comes out. All right. So I want to be respectful of time. We've only got 12 minutes left and I want to leave time for questions. So this one is probably the most nightmarish one. And here's why. And you know us, you know, we're transparent. This is the most nightmarish one because we don't have all the answers. And that bugs me because I'm a know-it-all and I love to know everything. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at, again, user agents being stripped from a user logging in. But when we looked at the IPs and when we looked at where they were coming from Namecheap. Now, for folks who know Namecheap and for folks who have done their research, I'm using Namecheap right now for my website, right? So you can use Namecheap for legit stuff. It's just that it do be cheap. One of the problems that we had with this is we don't know what users are clicking, right? Let's just get that out there. Our MDR for Microsoft 365, we don't know what emails you're ingesting. We don't monitor browser data, so we don't know what your users clicked. And so what we are hypothesizing for this one, and I'm going to throw the resource in chat, is that there was some kind of adversarial tool like Evil Proxy. And what they were doing there is they were just using sort of a Namecheap hosting server. Now, this could be from anything. It could have been from, AWS, Google. It kind of doesn't matter. It's not that the Namecheap thing is novel. It's that it was sus in what it was doing. So what we think was happening here is that these users were getting phished or were clicking something of some kind that was leading to the Evil Proxy kicking in. Now, again, we don't know that. We don't have all the answers. Maybe the threat actor did have access to credentials. I highly doubt it, just based on what was going on here. But this is a real pain in the butt. Like, this is really hard to look at this. And what's really frustrating is that our mailbox visibility isn't user visibility. There are some things that you're just going to have to rely on users for. And so someone put it in chat earlier. They said, hey, the most scary thing are our users because they'll click anything. You're damn right. We can have the best MDRs. We can have the best security personnel, the best postures, the best conditional access policies. I'm going to give you a little secret. The number one thing you can do for your organization is to have resilient and clued up users. And honestly, I think if you get that right, you can slack in some of the other things. There is no point buying an AI solution with all the defense in depth and all the tools if your users don't know what's up. Chris, that's quite controversial what I've just said. What do you make of it?
Oh man. Yeah, it sounds controversial, but I mean, I really think that what you're pointing to is really true. When it comes to things like this, when it comes to not even having all of the answers whenever you're doing like an incident response, I would say just getting to a little bit of information is better than having no information at all, right? So if you're looking at something like this, you're looking, they're leveraging things like Namecheap. I mean, that's really going to make things a little difficult. They're using things like bulletproof hosting. They're covering their tracks, but at least having something to work from, being able to go into that incident response. I mean, that's worth its weight in gold. What would you say, Herbie?
No, absolutely. And actually, as you were talking about this, it came to mind because it's the one thing that Dre and I, especially when we talk to our teams and the analysts, when you issue a report like this, because all of us naturally want to know the why, like how did this happen and why did it happen, and kind of play and fix and get to the bottom of that puzzle. This report and this nightmare is one that we can't. So as an analyst, I've talked to analysts where they're very like, well, I don't necessarily want to send this report because, I don't have any concrete answers. This seems very vague. And it's that mentality of sometimes like you're not going to be able to solve the question.
Mm-hmm.
But it's exactly what you talked about, reporting what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we can't answer the question 100%, this report still gives our partners and our customers a heads up as to like, hey, something sus is going on. You really need to dig into this. We can't, dig or do a deep dive from our perspective. This is all the visibility that we have. You're going to have to rely on your visibility and the tooling that you have, and the logging you have on your side to kind of figure this out. So it's a balance as well, but it very much at the end of the day, this is very much about getting the data to the right people as soon as possible and with context.
I think that's the key one. Like, I hate having to ask our readers to do things. I hate when a report says, hey, we don't have access to this telemetry. We don't know your clients. We don't know your users. And so when we have to say, hey, is it normal that this particular user comes in from California? Sometimes our partners come back to us and says, yeah, man, that's not normal. This is suspicious. Sometimes they come back and say it's fine. But it's one of those things of they may not even know. And it's a real hard point because there's no security solution that can do this for you. The only solution that we have is user awareness. Okay. And yes, Huntress offers security awareness training. Yep. I don't care what training you use. Okay. Use us, don't. It's great. Get your users ready because users are going to click absolutely everything. Okay. Having them well trained, having them have good cyber hygiene so that, yes, they do use good passwords, they do have MFA. All these things can be bypassed, but like we're just saying, defense in depth. And here's a little spicy point that I'll end on before Chris kind of takes us out. If your whole environment, if your Azure environment or Microsoft Entra ID, which I've not been saying this entire time, if your Active Directory environment can be brought down because one user clicked one thing, that's not on the user. I'll leave you to guess who it's on, but it's not on. Okay? Cool. So Chris, take us home, man.
All right. Fantastic. We have time for questions. So please get your questions in for me, for Dre, for Herbie, whatever your heart's desire. And we're going to get to as many questions as possible.
Cyber Hunter, as Dre mentioned, implemented the guided response could be hard. Are you looking to provide a hands-on response yourselves in the future? So Cyber Hunter, I'm assuming that your question is actually asking when is Huntress going to offer IR? I'm going to assume that the other gentleman can nod or shake if that's not the interpretation that we're being asked. We absolutely want to offer IR at some point. I'm super passionate about us offering IR. I come from the IR world. I want to do it. Herbie comes from the Visa Rackspace world where they basically dealt with incidents 24/7. Herbie's actually only 20 years old. It's just the stress that's aged him. It's difficult for us to do IR and our sort of amazing SOC right now because we're trying to focus on the mission. And the mission is all about keeping people safe as quick as we can. IR is a much slower process. I came from IR and I can attest to the fact that when we do it, we're going to do it in a way that no one else has done it, but we have to prepare for that. Our bread and butter, the way we're going to focus on that right now is through SOC. So it's through our EDR, it's through our security awareness training, it's through our MDR for Microsoft 365. But there's a huge appetite for us to be able to do hands-on guided response. Let us fix this for you. And we're already doing some light versions of that Cyber Hunter, so we can chat in a DM with more time. But there's a huge appetite. From Tobias, following up from Chris Hickey, do you recommend to install Huntress agents on the domain controller, or would it work when you also forward events to a log server? So I just want to clear something up. The Huntress agent is standalone. We don't need to rely on a sysmon config. We're not doing Windows event forwarding and Windows event collection. We don't need to do any of that. Sorry, my dog's about to bark because my partner has come home. What I'd suggest that you do is you install us on every agent in the environment. Here's why. When Herbie and I are busy doing analyses, when our team is busy doing analysis, we try our best to find out where did this threat come from. So it's not quite root cause analysis, but it's near close to it. Something that always comes up is we're installed on 99 of the 100 agents in an environment. Guess what the initial access host was? The one agent we're not installed on. So install us everywhere. Install us on your domain controllers. Install us on your RDG remote desktop gateway servers. Install us on your Exchange machines. Install us on everything. And I'm not saying that so that we make more money. I don't care about that. It's so that we can provide actual security visibility, because I don't want to go through your DNS event logs to figure out the host name and the IP. Why would you want me to do that? Just install me on the host and that will, okay, all right. So install us everywhere if you wouldn't mind.
And I would caveat that with, by all means, if you feel you need to also install and do, log shipping or whatnot, by all means do it. If you've got the resources and the team, especially the engineering team, that can do the care and feeding, by all means, to quote Miley Cyrus, you can have the best of both worlds.
So Cyber Hunter, you asked, is there a way that they can have our EDRs tool set without the service and operating myself? Unfortunately, Cyber Hunter, that's not something we offer. We built our agent to be completely SOC led. So we actually have very few bells, whistles, and features for our partners, for IT folk. It's much more of a managed service. But what I'd suggest, if you're interested, if you want to know about how some of this works, again, drop me a DM, we can chat. I don't think that we share so much, but I don't think we share enough about the cool features that are built for the Huntress users, i.e. the SOC. And we've got some real cool features. Sammy asked a good question. So alerts are typically slow to come through. Would this be faster? So Sammy, what am I actually going to do? Because I think you asked a question earlier about time, and we can get you specific answers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our product team, and I'm going to get you a precise number on exactly what the ingestion time versus original time is. As folks will know, Microsoft's telemetry isn't the speediest. And so there is a delay. But one of the things that we're quite good at is figuring out shortcuts. We've got some really clever people who can sort of, it's not that we can bypass Microsoft rules because no one can do that, but it's that we get to stuff quick even when there's a delay. And the delays that Herbie and I see, like, you know, we're seeing floating times of maybe 15 minutes, but nothing so crazy that it would, you know, be days and days and days. Again, this is a Microsoft thing, not an us thing. There's another question. I'm not sure I understand this one, Daniel, but let me try again. Any plans to correlate MSP RMM device data with O365 audit data to allow correlation of more data points? The other gentleman may be able to speak to this. I'm not sure I quite get this question, so you may want to try again, Daniel. It could be my lack of knowledge, though, so maybe spoon feed me.
I think we are a minute past the top of the hour, however.
Cool. Yep. I think that's it for questions, folks. Look, you know that you can always reach out to us on other mediums, so please do. There are lots of questions here that I think I'd love to answer. Angela saying, "Hey, maybe you're ingesting it from UAL." Cyberhunt saying, "What's the minimum license?" What we'll do is I'll take a quick note. We're going to get back to all these people. Make sure that you also, if folks keep me accountable, drop me a DM if you don't get an answer. But I'm going to make sure you get an answer. Chris, get us out of here, buddy.
Yeah, everyone, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedules to hang out with us, talk about some spooky stories, talk about Microsoft 365. Dre, Herbie, thank you so much for hopping on and jamming out with everybody. And with that, we will see everyone next time. Be sure to check out that November 1st webinar as well. And that's a wrap, folks.
Thank you, everyone. Have an awesome day.